Everybody. I'm going to be reading going to do a read along series on a very important book that was written in 2007, which is called Pentagon 9/11. The preface of the book comes from the Department of the Defense, which undertook preparation of a history of the September 11 attacks at the Pentagon. And this came at the suggestion of Brigadier General John Brown, who's the director of the U.S. Army Center of the U.S. Army Center of Military History. The Office of the Secretary of Defense Historical Office initiated the project as a defense historical study, which was basically a joint endeavor on behalf of the Department of Defense at the request of the director of the Naval Historical Center. The Office of the Secretary of Defense Historian, which assigned responsibility for the preparation of the study to the Naval Historical Center, which at the end gave us this magnificent book, which was co-authored by a number of people, Alfred Goldberg, Sarandis Papadoulos, Diane Putney, Nancy Burlage, and Rebecca Welch. And it was published in, I think it was the spring of 2007. I don't know the date, actually. In the book, it basically says just 2007 was published. And it was a 5-year study of all the evidence, analytical, eyewitness, technical, and physical evidence that was involved with this magnificent work. And what I'm going to be doing is, this is going to be a long series. This is going to be probably the most technical series at the Pentagon outside of Wayne Costy's brilliant 5-hour series about the Pentagon that you can find on YouTube, which was a magnificent source itself. I will actually link it in the description, which I think is the best series regarding all the technical details of the Pentagon. Because unfortunately, the Pentagon is still a divisive issue within the fringe element of the truther community. What I'm going to do is going to read certain pages of the book and talk about, it's going to talk about the history of the Pentagon renovation project, the building, and of course the attacks in fuller detail over the course of probably the next couple of months, because this is a really huge deep dive. I think it's important to talk about, and also it's quite a history, and it's probably the most comprehensive history that we have in a historical record, and nobody really talks about it. So I'm going to do a read along with you. I think it's better than just hearing my voice. You can see my ugly face, I guess. Whatever. So yeah, let's read along together, right? So this is going to be chapter 1, target the Pentagon. I'm not going to read the whole chapter. I'm going to read subsections of the chapter. And this subsection is called the building. And I'll make it bigger just so that everybody can read it and everybody can see, right? Oh, I can't fully. All right, this is good. I hope so. Knowledge of the building, knowledge of the purpose, design, and construction of the Pentagon is requisite to understanding the deadly effect of the September 11 attack. The original conception of the huge structure in the summer of 1941 derived from the urgent need for a space to house the rapidly expanding War Department headquarters in Washington. The shadow of the war in Europe and a growing threat in the Pacific from Japan had caused the United States to mount a partial mobilization of industry and manpower that greatly multiplied the activities and numbers of the Army in 1940-41. By July 1941, Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall had obtained permission from his superiors to plan for a single building to accommodate the burgeoning War Department staff scattered among 17 buildings in the Washington area. Where to place the building occasioned much controversy during the summer of 1941 until President Franklin D. Roosevelt decided in August on a site along the Potomac River in Arlington County, Virginia, directly across from Washington. Groundbreaking occurred on September 11th, exactly 60 years before the 2001 attack. The building was declared completed 16 months later, January 14, 1943. Now, there's a huge issue I know with fringe conspiracy theorists, when I say fringe conspiracy theorists, I'm meaning people who make remarkable, sometimes outlandish statements related to the attacks that aren't backed by any evidence. Um, People say, well, the attacks took place because the building was constructed on September 11, 2001. I mean, that's a stretch, right? I know the numerology 9/11 groups out there that, want to make a big thing of this. It's just, you can find relevance to numbers and anything. And there's no evidence to suggest any of this. They attacked on September 11, 2001, 60 years prior to the building itself. I really don't know what else to say about this other than, has it some relevancy? I don't know what to tell you. I don't deal with this like spiritual and numerology part of 9/11. It just, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know. Originally, the Pentagon reservation had 583 acres by 2001. It had shrunk to 280 acres because of transfers to other purposes. The building covers 29 acres. Parking lots take up 67 acres. North and south parking and other smalling parking areas accommodate about 10,000 vehicles. Huge. A center court of more than 5 acres provides appealing landscaping and more light for the inside A ring. Of the 6.6 million square feet in the building, about 3.8 million were originally devoted to office space. It's one of the biggest buildings in the world. Not in terms of height, but in terms of width, in terms of feet. From the beginning, the building architects and engineers had decided on a pentagonal shape and horizontal rather than vertical projection, limiting the height to 4 stories. This saves space, it's just deeper. The afterthought addition of a 5th story in 1942 raised the building's height to 71 feet, a low-rise structure of such massive dimensions. About a mile around the exterior gives the Pentagon a fortress-like appearance, not inappropriate for a military headquarters. The appeal of the pentagonal shape, second only to a circular shape and efficient design, lay in making it possible to reach anywhere in the huge building by foot in 7 or 8 minutes, because they need to get to certain areas. I mean, if we're talking about the War Department, it's about a matter of time. It's a matter of convenience to get to one office, to the other office, from that office to the office space, to where stairways, escalators, freight elevators, and wide ramps provide ready access to all parts of the building. At the outset of construction, given wartime austerity and fiscal constraints, all parties involved agreed that it would be a no-nonsense building. No marble, no decoration, no ornamentation. Truly, a Pentagon, the structure has 5 concentric rings, labeled A to E from the innermost ring out. 5 sides, 5 floors, 5 light wells between the rings, mainly at the upper 3 floors, and which provides daylight for most officers. The dimensions are impressive. The 5 exterior walls are each 921 feet long. That's the exterior wall. And the 5 innermost walls facing the center court each are 362 feet long. From the outer face of the E ring, which is the outside of the Pentagon, the A ring is the innermost, right? The outer face of A ring, the building has an overall depth of 396 feet. It's 396 feet from E ring to A ring. The roofs are concrete and flat, except for those over the more visible A and E rings and the 10 radical corridors, which are sloped and covered with each slate tiles. Outermost walls are faced with limestone and backed with reinforced 9-inch brick. Inner ring walls are of 10-inch architectural concrete. The building rests on more than 41,000 concrete piles, ranging from 27 feet to 45 feet in height, that support an equal number of columns reaching to the roof The building structural framework, floors and columns, is made of reinforced concrete. Now, what a lot of people tend to make the mistake is that they think the Pentagon layered in rings. That's not the case. It's layered in rings this way, not this way. Okay. The first floor of the Pentagon has no ring. Straight through to A&E Drive, to A ring, A&E Drive. Right? First floor has a ring. Second floor, 2 ring. Third floor, get it, right? Okay. 10 numbered corridors radiate like spokes from the A ring apexes on the inside of the building to the E ring on the outside. These wide corridors and narrow ones running through the middle of the rings provide 17.5 miles of hallways. 17.5 miles of hallways. The 5 rings are each 50 feet deep, separated by 30-foot gaps known as light wells, except for a 40-foot wide roadway, the A&E Drive, running through the light well between the B and C rings. That provides access for vehicles to the center court from the outside of the building through tunnels at either end. In much of the building on the first and second floors, there are no light courts between C, D, and E rings, so that office space is contiguous from the E ring through the C ring. The 5 exterior apexes are at the centers of the 5 wedges. The 5 rings are segmented by expansion joints at 4 locations evenly spaced around the structure. Remember what I said. Where load-bearing partitions are not present, non-bearing partitions separate offices. The 5 interior apexes at the A ring have exits to the center court at the first and second floor levels. The building's 5-digit numbering system indicate the floor, the ring, a letter, the corridor, and a specific room. Thus, 2E460 in the direct path of the crash is on the second floor, E ring, near corridor 4. E ring being the outside, right? The Pentagon Department of Defense workforce, numbering more than 30,000 military and civilians during World War II and the Korean War, had diminished to fewer than 22,000 people, more than half civilian, in 1998. After renovation work on Wedge 1 began in 1998, that's when the Pentagon renovation project started under Lee Evey, the building's Department of Defense population declined still further to about 18,000, where it stood on September 11, 2001. Built originally for the War Department, the Pentagon eventually came to include the major headquarters components of the Department of Defense after its establishment in 1947. The Office of the Secretary of Defense, the OSD, and the 3 military departments, the Army, Navy, and Air Force. The Marine Corps headquarters did not join the other 3 services in the building until about 1996. Accordingly, all of the most senior officials at the Defense Department had their offices in the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense, the secretaries of the 3 military departments, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the numerous high-ranking civilian and military officials who support them. In 1989, approaching the half-century mark, the Pentagon's historical importance and architectural merit received recognition by placement on the National Register of Historical Places. By that time, it had also become apparent that the aging building urgently needed to be thoroughly renovated and made more secure. It is an older building, of course. Concerned about the vulnerability of the structure had for some time engaged the attention of responsible officials. There have been security incidents as long ago as the 1960s. On 2 occasions, bombs planted in the building by unknown persons had exploded but caused little damage and no casualties. I never knew that. The growing terrorist threat in the 1980s and 90s had led to a number of security improvements both inside and outside the buildings. Of course, this is the growing threat of right-wing fundamentalist terrorism, and not talking about Arab fundamentalism. I'm talking about right-wing apolitical nationalist ideology. What happened in the 90s? The bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building, the bombing of the World Trade Center, and all across across parts of the world, you had the barracks bombing in Beirut and the Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia. Structure's major deficiencies, as reported to Congress, centered on materials and engineering system failures, fire protection and safety shortcomings, lack of technological modernization, and inadequate security. Of course, just like the World Trade Center, inadequate security. Well, there's inadequate security at the Pentagon. Yeah, and for years, you have, the fringe part of the truth movement claiming that this is the most secure building in the world. It's actually not. I lived in Vegas, for example. There are more cameras on a casino than there is on the Pentagon. There's actually more security at a casino than there is at the Pentagon. That's where the money is at, right? Ain't no money in the Pentagon. During its 50 years of existence, the original building systems have never been replaced or significantly improved, of course, because all the money went to the War Department. Right? We don't have money for upgrades. We don't have money for security, but we do have money to send missiles to bomb your city in the Middle East. We do have money for bullets and tanks and jeeps and whatnot, and healthcare for the soldiers that are currently killing you. But as for building redesign, a renovation project, or for security, yeah, we don't have money for that. It's the backwards thinking of these people. It makes sense. Consequently, all systems, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, plumbing, electricity, and telecommunications require replacement and modernization to bring the building up to code. Because before 1990, and we're talking about 1941, so 40, 41, 50 years, they didn't think about modernization, right? Well, the hell with the leaks, the hell with the electrical equipment. We need money for armaments. The 17.5 miles of corridors and 100,000 miles of telephone cables indicate the scale of the renovation task. Some parts of the ground support basement floors between the piles had settled as much as 12 inches. Major structural modifications to the pile supporting foundation were required to create more usable space by enlarging the mezzanine floor to cover most of the basement. A huge, huge building. And a lot of people don't realize it goes underground. Windows, both basement and double hung, were generally in disrepair and badly in need of replacement, right? I'm not going to show you. This is the picture, right? This is a picture before the attack. This is where the attack happened. This is the West Wing. Wedge 1, this is called. Wedge 5, 4, 3, 2. This was the last wedge to be renovated. There's the heliport, and blow it up a little bit. This is the where the I'm losing my momentary lapse of reason here. This is where the fire department is for the Pentagon. It's also the where that one individual worked that talked about seeing the plane crash into the building. I forget his name. Forbes, I think, or Scott something. I'm not too sure. I forgot his name. Hogan. That's right. His name is Hogan. I forgot his first name. And this is where the fire truck was at, right here. And this is also the like the traffic control for the helicopters, for the heliport. I'm sorry. The fire issue is here, and also the traffic the traffic control for the heliport. And over here, right over here, is the security gate, which captured the explosion of the attack. You can see how far it is. That's how far it was. So it can only capture. There was only two videos of it, but yeah, that's what we got there. So technical elements, windows, doors, doorways, and the building facade, concrete and limestone, which show cracks and spalling, required comprehensive size overhaul. Removal of hazardous materials, especially asbestos, well, that sounds familiar, right? Was another imperative. Moreover, the building did not incorporate modern fire and safety features. Hey, just like the World Trade Center, right? Moreover, the building did not incorporate modern fire and safety features. Finally, the machinery housed in the heating and refrigeration plant, a separate building nearby, had become obsolete. This long bill of particulars underscored the need for a total renovation of the Pentagon, right? In 1990, Congress authorized a complete overhaul of the Pentagon, capping the cost at 1.218 billion, 1.2 billion in 1994. To plan and eventually oversee this huge undertaking, Department of Defense established under Washington Headquarters Services on an office that evolved into Pentagon Renovation Program Office, or PENREN, in 1997. PENREN managed all aspects of planning and execution of the renovation and construction work, employing contractors for almost every phase of the project. It soon became evident that the original plan to complete the work within 10 years was optimistic. By 2001, planners projected a completion date of 2014. The first construction phase and necessary preliminary to all renovation was the new heating and refrigeration plant and associated exterior utility projects beginning in 1993 and completed in September of 97. There followed the renovation of the basement and the extension of the basement mezzanine floor, a project of high priority and longer duration. That was the final phase of the project. After Wedge 1 was going to be finished, they were going to do the basement and the mezzanine floor, which would have took a long time. Upgrading security stood high on the list for the next stage of reconstruction and renovation of the building proper, which began in 98 with clearance of Wedge 1, most of whom, approximately 5,000 occupants, were moved to leased facilities in Northern Virginia by the end of the year. By September 2001, Wedge 1 had been largely reoccupied, and work was underway on adjacent Wedge 2, which had been cleared of all but about 700 occupants. I'm sorry, Wedge 2. Wedge 1 was the beginning. Extending from midway between corridors 2 and 3 to midway between corridors 4 and 5, with more than 1 million internal gross feet of space, Wedge 1 was only 5 days from official completion and housed about 3,800 people on September 11th. Corridor 4 provided access to Wedge 1 and all floors, but a temporary construction barrier wall midway between corridors 4 and 5 limited access to Corridor 5 by Wedge 1, occupants in all rings and on most floors. Under the renovation plan of all the walls, utilities, and asbestos in Wedge 1 were removed. The outer wall was reinforced with structural steel, and as you can see here, let me lower it. These are all the corridors. Here's the wedges. So there's 10 corridors, right? North. And this is the heliport. This is Wedge 1. 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the color codes, right? The building's windows indeed required special attention. Analysis of attacks in large structures elsewhere bore out the flying glass from blast-shattered windows, which caused many casualties, including deaths. This is actually 60 Minutes did an episode about the Pentagon renovation program, which was based on the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City, in which the bombing led to people, sitting in offices next to windows, which caused a lot of buildings to be shredded, even outside of the building. And so the Pentagon wanted to reinforce the windows, all the windows of the Pentagon, with blast-resistant windows. The Pentagon's original, and of course, analysis of the attacks on large structures elsewhere brought flying glass and blast-shattered windows, caused many casualties, including deaths. The Pentagon's original 7,748, mostly casement-type windows, varying in size from 5 and 6 to 6 and 6 by 7, offered no resistance to blast-generated fragmentation. Reinforcing the windows on the outside of the E-ring and the A-ring would diminish the blast and fragmentation effects of exterior explosions. Now, to the people who want to talk about, why didn't the E-rings windows on the third or the fourth floors break out? The plane crashed there because they were designed to withstand a bomb. So you had the plane crashing into the first floor. There's no windows on the first floor because the first floor is totally destroyed. Parts of the second floor, windows were destroyed, but some windows even survived. Not talk about the impact area. We talk about the areas outside the impact, outside of the plane. You can see the little head of the plane on the second floor. The entire first floor is destroyed. You can see the damage of the wings before the structure even falls. Reinforcing the windows on the outside of the A&E ring would diminish the blast and fragmentation of exterior explosions. New windows for the E-ring, same size as their predecessors, but with glass 1.5 inches thick and weighing more than a ton apiece. A ton. Glass 1.5 inches thick, weighing a ton, were welded into special tubular steel frameworks. On September 11th, many survived the blast. Long regarded as a physical security risk, the extensive Southside loading dock for truck deliveries was replaced in August 2000 by a new 250,000 square foot remote delivery facility adjacent to North Parking, some hundreds of yards from the Pentagon. Named for David Cook, a longtime Department of Defense administrator, popularly known as the mayor of the Pentagon, and familiar to all as Doc, the RDF, the remote delivery facility, was linked to the Pentagon by tunnel in February 2002, permitting unloading of large vehicles at a safe distance from the building. After deliveries were x-rayed, goods came into the Pentagon by electric-powered carts via the tunnel. Built largely for security reasons, 2 new pedestrian bridges at the south side of the Pentagon entryways into corridors 2 and 3 at the second floor level provided massive barriers separating vehicular and pedestrian traffic. While security concerns received increasing attention as renovation progressed, the measures planned, underway, or instituted could neither anticipate nor fully defend against the powerful attack that came on September 11, 2001. Indeed, it is difficult to see how any realistic and physical damages to the Pentagon could have deflected or greatly diminished the effects of the attack. At the end of this subsection of the chapter. And what I'll do is I'll keep reading subsections of the chapter, of each chapter, instead of reading whole chapters, which would be a longer video, which will be an easier video to watch and listen to for you, the viewer or the reader or the listener, in which I'm grateful that you paid attention to. And of course, what this series is about is basically giving you a historical rundown about the facts and evidence of what took place at the Pentagon on September 11, 2001, in a much more expansive manner, and a much more historical manner too. So you're not going to get just what I'm reading with you. I'm also going to elucidate information in between while reading the subsections of the chapters for you, in which I'm hoping that you'll do your due diligence and research about what is being said in this video and what I'm saying is factually correct, because that's how we're all going to learn. And in order to, for those who want a new investigation or a hopeful congressional inquiry in the future for holding someone accountable, well, we can't go empty-handed. We have to know what we're talking about, and we have to show evidence for the claims that we're going to be making or the charges that we're going to be instituting on the people who basically created this mess or allowed for this mess to happen in the first place. Malfeasance, foreknowledge, or even facilitation of the attacks. No matter what, if you don't have evidence or information which could prosecute somebody, well, then you're going to be held liable for those charges. That's what happened to April Gallup. April Gallup, who worked at the Pentagon inside the building, didn't see what was happening outside the building. Later on, she was taken advantage of by frauds, and they basically left her in the dust because they have their preconceived agendas, which are all false, about no plane hitting the Pentagon or drones hitting the Pentagon and all the like, holograms and whatnot. So that's the end of this subsection of the chapter reading. And like as always, I'll see you in the next video. Have a good afternoon.